Case 1. David Enrique Mesa's case rose across the United States because it involved a secret relationship, a long trip across the border, and a plan that ended in a very sad and painful way. Mesa was described in court and in news reports as a male escort and a gay adult performer. He earned money by meeting clients, but behind the scenes, he was also in a private relationship with a Texas businessman named Jake Clyde Marandino. Federal records showed that Marandino cared deeply about Mesa. He trusted him, bought him gifts, and truly believed that the two of them would build a life together. But prosecutors later explained that Mesa was living two very different lives at the same time. While he told Marandino about their future together, he also had a girlfriend in San Diego who was expecting a baby. She did not know anything about his secret relationship, and Mesa did everything he could to hide the truth from her. In late April 2015, Mesa told Marandino that they should travel together to Baja California in Mexico. He presented the idea as a hopeful new beginning, a chance to start something fresh. Court documents showed that Marandino believed this plan completely. He trusted Mesa so much that he changed his will, making Mesa the person who would receive his property if anything happened. This choice showed just how strong his trust was. But on May 2, 2015, everything changed. Marandino was found in a quiet area near a road between Rosarito and Ensenada. He had been stabbed many times. His motorcycle had been placed nearby, as if someone wanted it to look like a simple crash. But investigators could quickly see that the scene did not match an accident. The wounds, the way the motorcycle was left, and the surroundings all showed signs that something violent and planned had happened. Not long after the killing, Mesa rushed back to San Diego. He gave different stories to different people, and none of the stories matched. This made investigators much more suspicious. Police in Mexico and federal agents in the United States began working together to find answers. They collected phone records, messages, travel logs, and security videos. They looked at where Mesa and Marandino had been, who they talked to, and what they said in their messages. When investigators put all the pieces together, a clear picture began to form. They found messages from Mesa that showed he had been planning things in secret. They discovered he had tried to remove or destroy things that could have helped the investigators learn the truth. Because of all this, the United States brought very serious charges against him. Mesa was charged with foreign domestic violence resulting in death and with conspiracy to obstruct justice because he tried to hide what happened. On the 2nd of May, 2017, exactly 2 years after the killing, a federal jury in San Diego found Mesa guilty. During the trial, many witnesses spoke in court, and many records, photos, and messages were shown. The jury studied everything carefully and agreed that the evidence clearly pointed to Mesa. Later that same year, U.S. District Judge Jeffrey T. Miller announced Mesa's sentence. The judge gave him life in prison for the killing and added 20 more years for obstruction, but both sentences would run at the same time. Case 2. Hector Scott became known across the ACT in early 2008 after ABC Canberra released several reports explaining what had happened in his case. Before this time, he lived a quiet life where only the people around him knew who he was or what he did for work. He worked as a male sex worker in Canberra and met clients through private arrangements. For a long period, nothing about his work was in the news, and most people had no idea who he was. But everything changed when police said he had been working while knowing he was living with HIV. This created a very serious problem because the ACT has clear rules that must be followed to keep everyone safe. Police also said he had not registered as a sex worker, which is something the law requires. Because of these two major concerns, many people began watching the case closely to learn what the court would decide. As time went on, the story grew bigger. More people learned about it when ACT Health made a public announcement confirming that Hector Scott was HIV positive. This was an important detail because it explained why the charges were treated with so much seriousness. In the ACT, people who work in this type of job must follow strict steps. They must know their health status, be honest about it, and follow the registration rules set by the government. These rules are made to protect clients, protect workers, and make sure that health risks are handled properly. When ACT Health spoke about the case, the public became even more focused on each update. Many people were concerned because they believed the safety rules had not been followed. For months, the case stayed in the news and continued to be a major topic in the community. In February 2008, ABC News shared another important update. Hector Scott had entered a guilty plea. This meant he admitted to working while knowing his HIV status, and he admitted he had not registered as a sex worker as the law required. His decision to plead guilty helped the court move forward more quickly. It also showed the public that he accepted responsibility for what he had done. For many people who had been watching closely, this moment was very important. It answered the question of whether he would deny the charges or agree that they were true. Once he pleaded guilty, the only remaining question was what the judge would decide as his punishment. News outlets continued giving updates, and many people waited to hear the final result. The case continued through the year, and in September 2008, the final decision was announced. ABC News confirmed that Hector Scott was sentenced to 2 months and 14 days in jail. This meant he had to spend time behind bars as part of his punishment. The court also placed him on a 2-year good behavior order. Before we dive into the next case, please support my channel by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. This would help the algorithm recommend the video to more true crime lovers on YouTube. Thank you very much. Case 3. Ash Armand. Many people first knew his name from the escort world in Las Vegas and from the TV show Gigolos. His real name is Akshaya Kubiak, but most people recognize the name he used on television. For several years, Ash worked as a male escort through a professional agency, meeting clients and building a big public image around his job. On the Showtime series, he was shown living a bright and active life in Las Vegas. He often spoke calmly, appeared very sure of himself, and showed confidence in the way he walked and talked. To many viewers, he seemed like someone who had full control of his life. Because of this, the next part of his story shocked many people who had once watched him on TV and thought they knew who he was. Before the crime happened, Ash lived in a comfortable home in Las Vegas. He spent time with friends, met clients, and worked in the escort industry as usual. From the outside, nothing looked strange or worrying. His life looked steady, and he continued doing the things people saw on TV. But on July 16, 2020, everything changed suddenly. Police officers were called to his home after someone reported that a woman inside the house needed help right away. When officers arrived, they found 29-year-old Herline Dulai, who was not breathing. Emergency workers tried to save her, but sadly, it was too late. A medical examiner later explained that she died from strong physical force and pressure to her neck. This meant the situation inside the house had become violent. Reports later said that Ash and Herline had taken psychedelic mushrooms the night before the police were called. These drugs can change how a person thinks, feels, and acts. They can make a person confused, frightened, or unable to control themselves. According to police and news reports, things inside the home got out of control very quickly. When officers entered the house, they found Ash in a confused and troubled state. They said he showed clear signs of being under the influence of drugs, and his behavior did not make sense. The news spread fast through Las Vegas and across the country because many people could not understand how someone who once appeared on a popular TV show could be involved in such a serious case. Fans who had watched him on Gigolos were shocked and searched for more information to understand what had happened. The case moved into the court system the following year. As more details became public, people learned how serious the incident had been. Evidence showed that Herline had suffered fatal injuries, and the violence inside the home had led directly to her death. In September 2021, Ash stood in a Nevada courtroom and made a major decision. He pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter and mayhem, 2 charges that explained the harm caused during the incident. By pleading guilty, he accepted responsibility for what he had done, which meant the court could move forward with punishment. In December 2021, a Nevada judge sentenced Ash to 8 to 20 years in prison. This meant he would spend many years behind bars, with the exact time depending on his behavior and other legal factors. Case 4. Henry Eugene Hodes was known in both Tennessee and Georgia because of a series of murders that happened between 1988 and 1990. Reports explained that Hodes worked as a male prostitute, meeting men who paid him for private company. He often traveled from place to place, and many of the people he met were men who hired him for short visits. During these years, some of these meetings ended in deadly attacks. The victims included Barry McDonald in 1989, Ronald Bassett in 1990, and Michael Wisnant in 1990. Police later learned that Hodges was moving between Tennessee and Georgia, meeting clients and stealing from them. In several cases, he also took their lives. As officers began to connect the events, they saw a clear pattern that pointed strongly toward Hodges as the person responsible for the killings. The story became clearer once police began comparing the details from each crime scene. On July 14, 1989, Barry McDonald was found dead in Tennessee. Investigators learned that he had met with Hodges shortly before he died. This information made them look more closely at other cases involving men who had met Hodges. Less than a year after McDonald's death, on May 14, 1990, another man, Ronald Bassett, was killed in Tennessee. Once again, Hodges had met with the victim before the attack. This second case raised even more concern. Then, only 2 days later, on May 16, 1990, Hodges killed a third man, Michael Wisnant, in Georgia. When police discovered that 3 men had died similarly after meeting the same person, they quickly focused their search on Hodges. He was arrested soon after Wisnant's death. When Hodges was questioned by officers, he admitted to several of the killings. He also talked about other crimes he had committed. These statements helped investigators see that the cases from Tennessee and Georgia were connected, even though they happened in different cities and on different dates. Police collected physical evidence, history of his movements, and the words he shared during questioning. Together, these pieces created a strong case, making it clear that Hodges was responsible for the deaths of McDonald, Bassett, and Wisnant. Once the investigation was completed, Hodges faced courts in both states. In Georgia, he pled guilty to killing Michael Wisnant. Because of this guilty plea, the court gave him a life sentence. But his most serious punishment came from Tennessee. There, he stood trial for the murders of Barry McDonald and Ronald Bassett. A jury listened carefully to the details, reviewed the evidence, and found him guilty of first-degree murder in both cases. For the murder of Ronald Bassett, the jury said Hodges should receive the death penalty. The judge also added a life sentence and 70 more years for other charges linked to the murders. These sentences together ensured that Henry Eugene Hodges would never return to normal life outside prison walls. Even if the death sentence is never carried out, the added life terms and extra years mean that he will remain in custody for the rest of his life. Case 5. John Walker appeared in news reports across England after he was sent to prison for blackmail. The Daily Telegraph and other news outlets explained that John worked as a gay escort. One day, a married businessman arranged to meet John in a hotel. The man wanted the meeting to stay private, and the room was supposed to be a place where no one else would know what happened. During their time together, a photo was taken that showed the man lying on a hotel bed while wearing women's underwear. At first, this moment stayed between the two of them, but later, this single photo became the center of a very serious problem that changed the man's life and John's life too. After they left the hotel, John Walker made a choice that caused a lot of fear. Instead of leaving the meeting in the past, he reached out to the businessman's wife. He sent her the photo from the hotel room, showing her something she did not expect to see. In his messages, John said the man had to give him money, or the picture would be shared with others. This was not a small request. It was something that created worry and stress for the family. Reports said the businessman felt so scared of what could happen that he paid almost £5,000. He believed that paying the money might make the problem go away, but the messages continued, and the pressure kept growing. As the days went by, the businessman realized he could not live with the fear any longer. Every message from John made him feel trapped. He did not know who might see the photo next or what John might do later. At this point, the businessman made the decision to go to the police. He brought everything with him: the messages John sent, the photo, and proof of the money he had already given. Police officers looked at each piece of evidence carefully. They saw how the messages demanded money. They saw how the photo was used to scare the man. They also saw the record of payments that had been made. All of this helped them understand exactly what had happened. When the case reached the courtroom, the judge listened to the details. The court learned about the hotel meeting, the picture taken in the room, the contact with the man's wife, and the money that had been paid out of fear. The judge said John Walker's actions were meant to make the man feel afraid, so he would hand over money. This made the situation a clear case of blackmail under English law. The evidence in front of the court showed a pattern of threats, and the judge explained that using someone's private moment to force money from them is a serious crime. News reports, including those from the Gay UK, stated that the judge decided John Walker should go to prison. He was sentenced to 32 months in prison. If you found this video interesting so far, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. This would help the algorithm push this video to reach more people on YouTube. Thanks for your support. Case 6. Luka Magnotta became known across Canada after a crime that happened in 2012. Before this crime took place, Luka lived a life that many people found confusing and unusual. He worked as an escort to earn money, meeting clients and offering paid companionship. He also acted in gay adult films. These jobs gave him income, but they also placed him in worlds where attention, image, and appearance mattered a lot. People who met him during those years said he often changed his looks. At different times, he used new hairstyles, makeup, clothes, or even tried to show himself as a completely different person. He spent many hours online, posting pictures and videos, creating new profiles, and trying hard to make others pay attention to him. Even with all this activity, nothing from his early life showed what would soon come to light. Still, these parts of his past later became important because many people wanted to understand what kind of life he lived before everything changed. The crime took place in late May 2012 in Montreal, where a 33-year-old student named Jun Lin lost his life. This act was recorded on video, and parts of the recording were placed online. This alone caused fear and shock because many people had never seen something so serious shared on the internet. But the events did not stop there. Soon after, body parts were mailed to different places, including schools and political offices. These packages made people across the country feel unsafe, and families worried about what might happen next. Police officers began working quickly to find out who was responsible. They collected evidence, checked videos, looked at online activity, and followed every clue they could find. It did not take long for investigators to identify Luka as the main suspect, but by the time they reached that conclusion, he had already left Canada. This turned the search into an international effort, with police in several countries watching airports, hotels, and online networks in the hope of locating him as fast as possible. The search finally came to an end on the 4th of June, 2012, when Luka was found inside an internet cafe in Berlin, Germany. Reports say he was sitting at a computer and reading news stories about himself when officers entered the cafe and arrested him. After his arrest, he was returned to Canada to face trial. The trial took place in Quebec and continued through 2014. During this time, the court looked at the evidence, listened to witnesses, and reviewed the details from the crime scene and the manhunt. On the 23rd of December, 2014, the jury reached a decision. Luka was found guilty of first-degree murder, along with several other charges connected to the case. The court gave him a life sentence, and he cannot ask for parole for 25 years. He also received 19 additional years for other offenses, but these are served at the same time as the life sentence. Case 7. Helg Sgarbi's story spread across Europe after German police uncovered a major blackmail case in 2009. Many news reports explained that he often introduced himself as a paid companion to rich women. He spoke gently, spent time with them, and acted as if he truly cared about their lives. Because he behaved this way, many of the women believed they were building a safe, private relationship with him. They trusted his words and opened up about their personal struggles, their daily routines, and even their private worries. This trust slowly gave him access to their homes, their thoughts, and sadly, their money. One of the women he targeted was Suzanne Klatten, a BMW heiress who is known as one of the richest women in Germany. As reporters continued to study the case, the story became even clearer and more serious. CBS News and Reuters confirmed that Sgarbi secretly recorded private meetings with Klatten. She had no idea that she was being filmed. Before the recordings were ever used, Sgarbi told her a story that was not true. He claimed he had been involved in a car accident and said he needed money to help pay for people he claimed were hurt. He acted worried and sounded like he was facing big trouble. Clatton felt sorry for him because she believed he was genuinely struggling, wanting to help someone she thought she cared about. She gave him about 7 million euros. At that moment, she believed she was doing the right thing, but the truth started to show itself slowly. After she gave him the large amount of money, he did not stop. Instead, he made new demands. He told her that he had private recordings of their time together, and he threatened to show these recordings unless she paid him much more money. This scared her deeply because she believed their time together had been private and respectful. Some news reports said he asked for extremely large amounts that reached tens of millions of euros. Reports also confirmed that other rich women faced similar pressure from him. Some of these women had already given him money before they understood they were being targeted. Each part of the case showed how Sgarbi used trust to gain control over the people who believed in him. In 2009, everything finally changed when German police arrested him and brought him to court. Reporters said the court listened carefully to all the evidence. The information showed that he used false stories, emotional pressure, and hidden recordings to make wealthy women give him large sums of money. The court found that these actions were not sudden mistakes, but part of a plan. After studying all the information, the court found him guilty of blackmail and fraud. Reuters and France 24 confirmed that he received a 6-year prison sentence for his actions. Case 8. Jami Copatch's case became popular because it showed that tax rules apply to every person, no matter what kind of work they do or how they earn their money. Federal records explained that Copatch worked as a male escort and earned money by meeting clients who paid him for his time. For a while, this work gave him a steady income, and it helped him take care of his daily needs. But the real trouble began when the government took a closer look at the tax forms he had sent in. Investigators noticed that the numbers on his forms did not match the amount of money he was actually receiving. They said Copatch did not tell the government about all the income he earned, and this mistake slowly grew into a very serious problem. To understand exactly what happened, investigators gathered many different types of financial information. They studied bank accounts to see how much money was coming in. They looked at business papers, payment records, and documents showing the years Copatch had been working. They carefully compared every number to see if anything was missing. All these details helped them build a complete picture of how much money Copatch had earned. When they added everything together, the numbers showed that he had made more money than what he had told the government. The income he did not report was large enough to reduce the amount of tax money the United States was supposed to receive. Because paying taxes is a legal requirement, the government decided to take formal action. They brought charges against Copatch for filing false tax returns and for failing to report all the income he earned. Prosecutors explained that tax rules apply to every person, no matter what job they have. It did not matter that Copatch earned his money from escort work. The important part was that he did not follow the tax laws. When a person makes money, the law says that person must list the full amount honestly on their tax forms. In Copatch's case, the numbers on his tax forms did not match the numbers in his bank records. This difference made the situation clear, and the evidence was strong. Eventually, Copatch chose to plead guilty to the charges. By doing this, he admitted that he did not follow the rules and accepted responsibility for the actions described by the investigators and prosecutors. During the court hearing, the judge explained that the punishment was based only on the tax crimes and not on the escort work itself. The escort work was not the illegal part. The problem was the income that was never reported. The judge looked at the financial records, the amount of tax that had not been paid, and how long the errors had continued. After reviewing everything, the judge decided on the punishment. Copatch was sentenced to 21 months in federal prison, a sentence meant to show the importance of following tax laws. He was also ordered to repay the taxes he owed, which meant he had to return the money that should have been paid to the government in the first place. Case 9. Michael Brennan's act rose to attention in the United Kingdom because a quiet visit between him and a client suddenly turned into a crime that no one expected. Reports explained that Brennan worked as a gay male escort, and he also spent his days cleaning rooms in a hospital. One of the people who met him through his escort work was Paul Simons, a 54-year-old antiques dealer who lived a calm life in Chelmsford, Essex. In May 2013, Brennan went to see Simons inside a small flat. From the outside, it looked like a simple, ordinary meeting, the kind that raised no concern. But behind that door, events unfolded that later filled a courtroom and stayed in public memory for years. Inside the flat, things took a dark turn. During their time together, Brennan stabbed Simons many times. When police arrived at the flat, they found a very quiet room, but the evidence inside showed that something terrible had happened. Officers could clearly see signs of a violent attack. The flat itself did not give any warning from the outside, but the inside told a completely different story. Everything in the room helped investigators understand that this was not an accident or a sudden loss of control. It was an act carried out with force. When the case went to Chelmsford Crown Court, prosecutors explained how the attack happened and how the injuries showed a clear purpose. Reporters who followed the trial said the court used strong language to describe the way Simons was harmed. The judge and the prosecution explained that the attack was done in a direct and purposeful way. They said Simons had no chance to stop what was happening and no way to protect himself. These details helped the jury understand the seriousness of the situation. Each piece of information, from the injuries to the events inside the flat, helped build a clear picture of the final moments. As the trial continued, the jury listened carefully to the evidence. They heard about the number of injuries, the location, and how Brennan had moved during the attack. They also heard about the relationship between Brennan and Simons, and how the meeting was supposed to be like the many other appointments Brennan had through his escort work. But the evidence showed this meeting was very different. When all the facts were presented, the jury reached their decision. They found Brennan guilty of murder. During the sentencing, the judge spoke about the crime and explained why it carried such a strong punishment. Reports said the court described the killing as a brutal and efficient execution and as a cold and calculated act. These words showed how serious the court viewed Brennan's actions. The judge explained that the attack showed planning, control, and a clear purpose. Because of this, the judge sentenced Brennan to life in prison. Case 10. Damen Byrnes. Many reports described Damen as a male escort. This was the type of work he did when the events began, and nothing in his regular job suggested anything extreme or dangerous. Everything changed when he became involved with a man named Marius Gustafsson, who ran a private online group that encouraged extreme body modification acts. This group operated outside normal medical settings, without doctors or any trained professionals, and that choice led to serious harm. Damen's connection to this group became important in 2017 when he took part in an act that shocked both the public and the courts. Court documents explain that Damen used a kitchen knife to remove Gustafsson's penis. This was not done in a hospital or any place where trained workers could keep someone safe. Instead, it happened in a simple home, using tools that were never meant for anything like this. There was no medical support, no proper equipment, and no understanding of how dangerous such an act could be. The entire procedure was also recorded on video, and the footage was later shared through the online website that Gustafsson ran. The group had taken part in several other dangerous acts over many years, including other removals and extreme operations that placed people in great danger. Damen's act became one of the most important pieces of evidence because it clearly showed how far the group was willing to go without any real training. As more details came out, the case drew attention across the country. People wanted to understand how such extreme acts could take place inside normal homes, and how individuals involved in simple escort work could become part of something so risky. The videos, messages, and materials collected by investigators helped the courts understand the full picture. These were not accidents or moments of confusion. They were planned actions carried out by people with no medical skills, using tools that should never be used for cutting human flesh. The risks were huge, and the harm was permanent. When the case finally moved to court, Damen did not try to deny what he had done. He accepted responsibility and admitted to causing grievous bodily harm with intent, which is one of the most serious injury offenses under UK law. The court explained that even if someone says they want such harm, the law does not allow anyone to damage another person's body in this way. Judges made it clear that these acts were extremely dangerous and could have caused death. After reviewing all the evidence, the court sentenced Damen to 5 years in prison. Case 11. Stephen Port became known all over the United Kingdom because of a series of crimes that happened in Barking, London, between 2014 and 2015. Sky News reported that Port worked as a chef, and at the same time he also met men online for paid escort jobs. To most people who lived near him, he looked like a quiet man who kept to himself. He did not draw attention, and he often seemed shy or distant. But while his daily life looked simple, his online life was very different. Through dating apps, he talked to young men and invited them to visit him at his flat. At first, the messages looked friendly and normal, but soon these meetings would lead to situations that placed many young men in great danger. The first victim was Anthony Walgate, a young man who also worked as a male escort. In June 2014, Port hired Anthony for a paid meeting. Instead of making sure the meeting was safe, Port gave him a very strong dose of GHB, a drug that quickly makes a person weak and unable to move. Anthony died soon after taking the drug. Instead of calling for help, Port tried to cover up what happened. He carried Anthony's body outside and left it near the entrance of his building. It was reported that Port told police a false story, saying he found the body by chance. Police believed him at the time, and the truth stayed hidden. But this was only the beginning. Over the next months, 3 more young men, Gabriel Cavari, Daniel Whitworth, and Jack Taylor, were found dead in the same part of Barking. All of them had met Port through dating apps, and all of them had been given dangerous amounts of GHB. As more young men were found dead, their families began begging for answers. They wanted to understand how their sons, brothers, and friends had died. BBC News later confirmed that several important clues were missed during the early investigations, which allowed Port to keep meeting new victims. The deaths followed a pattern that could have been seen sooner. Port met the men online, invited them to his flat, gave them drugs, and assaulted them while they were unconscious. After they died, he carried their bodies to outdoor areas so the deaths would look unrelated. The first 3 victims were found in almost the same place, very close to each other, which made the families even more worried. Yet the cases were treated as separate events for a long time. It was only after the 4th victim, Jack Taylor, that detectives finally connected the deaths. They began looking more closely at Port's online activity, the messages he sent, and the way he arranged meetings. Once the police searched his flat, they found many pieces of evidence that showed what had really happened. At last, the truth could no longer be hidden. In 2016, Stephen Port was taken to trial at the Old Bailey, one of the most important courts in the UK. During the trial, jurors heard about the drugs, the messages, and the way Port had repeated the same actions again and again. The evidence was clear and strong. Port was found guilty of 4 murders, 4 rapes, and several other offenses, including drugging and assaulting the men he met. Because of how serious his crimes were, the judge gave him a whole life sentence. Case 12. Michael Smith was widely recognized across the United Kingdom after a violent event that shocked both Manchester and people all around the country. Many news reports, including The Guardian, described him as a former rent boy, which meant he had spent time working in sex work when he was younger. He also had a long history of getting into trouble with the law, with many past offenses already on his record. He often spent time around Manchester's gay village, meeting different people, moving from place to place, and trying to get by in a busy part of the city. Even though he had a history of crime, no one expected him to become the center of a case involving a very famous television actor. But in the year 2000, one meeting changed everything and placed his name on front pages across the nation. That night, Michael crossed paths with John Savident, a well-known actor from the popular television show Coronation Street. Many people recognized Savident, especially for his long-running role, so the case gained attention very quickly. Reports explained that the two met in Manchester's gay village, talked for a while, and then went back to Savident's flat. What happened inside that flat became one of the most talked-about crimes of the year. According to the court, the situation turned into a violent robbery. During the struggle, Michael pulled out a knife and stabbed Savident in the neck. The attack was fast, frightening, and extremely dangerous. Savident lost a great amount of blood and was in danger. Even though he was badly hurt, he managed to escape long enough to call for help, which saved his life. When the news of the attack became public, it shocked fans of the show and left many people confused about how something so serious could happen inside a quiet home. The case moved into the court system soon after the attack. Prosecutors told the court that the stabbing was not an accident. They said it happened as part of a plan to take valuables from the actor's home. The court listened to the evidence and, after looking closely at what happened, found Michael Smith guilty of wounding with intent and robbery. These are very serious charges under UK law because they involve planned violence and the use of a weapon. Judges also took note of Michael's long criminal history, which showed a pattern of repeated offenses over many years. This added more weight to the decision that the court had to make. For the attack on John Savident, the court sentenced Michael Smith to 7 years in prison. Case 13. Tim Blake Bowell was convicted in 2009 after a court case that surprised a lot of people. Reports explained that Tim worked as a PE teacher at King Ethelbert School in Kent. Every day, he stood in front of children, taught them sports, and helped them learn new skills. But after school hours, Tim was living a very different life that almost no one around him knew about. According to several news reports, Tim also worked as a male prostitute, and he and his wife ran a brothel from a flat in Canterbury. Inside that flat, several women worked, and the couple looked after the money and the daily running of the business. Some reports even stated that both Tim and his wife offered their own services as well. This part of their lives stayed hidden for a long time until police began looking into the activities inside the flat. The case became clearer once officers started investigating how the brothel worked. Reports said Tim and his wife rented the flat and used it as a place where several sex workers carried out their work. Tim helped with many parts of the business. He placed advertisements so clients could find them, answered phone calls from people wanting appointments, collected the money that came in, and paid for things like rent and other bills. While he went to school each day and acted like a normal teacher, the brothel continued to run quietly in the background. For a long time, no one at the school knew what was happening. But when police spoke with the women who worked inside the flat and checked the financial records, everything slowly became clear. Step by step, officers learned that Tim was not simply helping, but was playing a major role in controlling the women and making sure the brothel kept earning money. This was against the law, even though it had been kept hidden for a long period. When the case reached the court at Canterbury Crown Court on the 7th of July 2009, Tim had to stand before the judge and answer for what he had done. He was charged with controlling prostitution for gain. Tim pleaded guilty. The judge explained that running a brothel and being in charge of women for financial reasons was a very serious crime. Because of this, Tim was sentenced to 9 months in prison. News reports also explained that his wife faced similar charges, but received a suspended sentence because the court considered her personal situation and health. After the conviction, the teaching authorities reviewed Tim's case. Once they saw the court documents and confirmed the sentence, they decided that Tim should never be allowed to teach again. This meant he was banned from working in schools for the rest of his life. His hidden life, which had been kept secret for so long, finally became known to everyone. Parents, students, and teachers were shocked to learn that the man who had taught sports at school had also been running an illegal business in his private life. Case 14. Randy Weigel Stevens' name spread across Indiana after a case involving the mayor of Batesville in 2015. Reports from the HIV Justice Network explained that Stevens worked as a male sex worker, meeting clients for paid encounters whenever they reached out to him. One of those clients was Mayor Richard Flederman, who arranged to meet Stevens during the summer of that year. In the beginning, everything looked simple. It appeared to be a private meeting between two adults who understood what they were doing and agreed to it. There were no signs of trouble, no signs of fear, and nothing that suggested the meeting would become a public story. But once the meeting ended, everything changed. The mayor learned something he had not been told before, and what he discovered made him deeply worried. He felt the information was serious enough to call the police. From that moment on, the case stopped being private, and people across Indiana began hearing about it on the news. According to Reuters and AP News, investigators soon discovered that Stevens was living with HIV at the time of the encounter. Indiana has a law that says anyone who has HIV must tell their partner before any sexual activity happens. This law exists to help people make safe and informed choices. Reports explained that Stevens did not share his HIV status with the mayor before the encounter, and this was the main reason the case grew so serious so quickly. When the mayor found out later, he said he felt scared and unsure of what might happen next. He believed the situation needed to be handled by the police and not left between the two of them. As officers gathered more information, they learned that there were several parts to the case, not just one. Police records showed that Stevens was facing 3 different charges. The first charge was failing to tell the mayor about his HIV status, which was required by law. The second charge was prostitution because the meeting had involved payment. Local Indiana news also shared that there was a third charge of intimidation. This charge was linked to messages that were sent after the encounter, messages that made the situation feel even more stressful for the mayor. Because of these messages, the case became more complicated. As more people learned about the story, it spread quickly across Indiana. Reporters discussed the case on TV, wrote about it in newspapers, and shared updates online. Many people became curious about how the situation started, what the law required, and why the case had become so serious. When the case finally reached the courtroom, Stevens chose to plead guilty to all 3 charges. By doing this, he accepted responsibility for everything described by the police and the prosecutors. According to the HIV Justice Network and several Indiana news stations, the judge decided not to send him to jail. Instead, Stevens received a 908-day suspended sentence, which meant he would be placed on probation. Even though he did not go to prison, it was still a real criminal sentence. Case 15. Jonathan Peterson. Many people across Durban knew him after a commercial crime case that surprised and confused many people. Reports from Judges Matter identified him as a male sex worker, someone who worked different jobs to try to support himself. His life already had its challenges, but during this period, he made a decision that changed everything. He created a second identity, a false character that did not belong to him. He started calling himself Andile Duma, and he told people he was a doctor. He walked inside 2 large hospitals in Durban, moving through the halls as if he belonged there. He wore clothing that made him look professional, acted calm and sure of himself, and spoke to others in a way that made them believe he truly understood medical work. Nothing in his appearance or behavior suggested to people that he was pretending, and that made his disguise even more convincing. Patients, staff, and visitors who saw Jonathan inside the hospital had no idea that he was not trained in medicine. He moved with confidence, which made it easy for people to accept his presence. This fake doctor identity soon became the tool he used to carry out a larger plan. The big problem began when Jonathan used this false persona to start a tender scam. He approached 3 business people and told them he had access to special hospital tenders. These tenders, he claimed, were valuable contracts that could bring them good income if they were approved. He spoke with authority, using the image of Dr. Duma to make his words sound believable. Because he looked and acted like a doctor, the business people trusted him. They believed they were dealing with someone honest and well-connected, and they did not think they needed to check if his story was true. Over time, the victims paid him a total of around 200,000 rand, expecting the promised contracts to be confirmed soon. They waited for updates, believing everything was moving forward. But days turned into weeks, and nothing happened. No tenders were approved, no documents arrived, no progress was made. Slowly, the victims began to feel uneasy. They started asking Jonathan questions, but his answers did not match what he said before. That was when they discovered the truth. Jonathan was not a doctor. The name Andile Duma was fake, and the tenders he promised did not exist at all. Everything he told them had been a lie, created to make them trust him and give him money. The case eventually reached the Durban Commercial Crimes Court, where the full story was presented to the judge. The court explained how Jonathan had gained trust by pretending to be someone important and knowledgeable. His scam caused real financial harm, and the victims also felt emotional stress because they had believed him completely. In court, it became clear that Jonathan had never studied medicine, never trained as a doctor, and had no right to be inside those hospitals pretending to be one. He used a false title to trick people, and it allowed him to collect money through dishonest means. After reviewing the facts, the court found him guilty of fraud and related offenses. He was given a prison sentence for his actions. If you enjoyed watching this video, please subscribe to my channel. I post interesting true crime documentaries on the channel every day. Thanks for watching.